Friends, welcome to today's special broadcast as we talk about the UN and Israel, specifically the UN's intense bias against Israel, double standards used against Israel, extreme animus expressed towards Israel over many, many years. Let me say this very plainly out of the gate. I do not believe that as followers of Jesus, we have to agree with every decision Israel makes. I don't believe as followers of Jesus, we are called to, commanded to endorse everything Israel does. I've made clear my understanding of what it means to stand with Israel and our call as believers to do such. But standing with Israel many times may be differing with Israel or saying this is wrong. Within Israel, there's massive criticism of Israel. You will not find harsher criticism of Israel anywhere in the world than within Israel. You will not find harsher criticism of Prime Minister Netanyahu anywhere in the world than within Israel. So I'm not saying that we just have to accept in a blanket way everything Israel does because Israel is Israel. Absolutely not. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's possible for any group, race, minority that has been persecuted, that has been discriminated against, it's very possible for any of those groups to see themselves as victims even when they're not. For example, we can overplay the anti-Semitic card. We can say everything is anti-Semitism. There are even Jewish jokes. I remember as a boy, my dad telling me a joke. Now he did it with an actual stutter to illustrate the point. I don't want to belabor it and do that, but there was a Jewish guy who was a terrible stutterer, could barely get a word out. It was painful to listen to him. And he's talking to a Jewish friend of his, and he tells him that he wants to apply for a job as a radio broadcaster. And he goes in for the interview, and he comes out, and the whole joke, the guy's stuttering. This is not to make fun of stutterers, God forbid. It's simply to illustrate a point that we can overplay the anti-Semitism card. And this is a Jewish joke. And the Jewish guy comes out and stutters his way through explaining that he didn't get the job because they don't like Jews. No, he didn't get the job because he couldn't speak. He couldn't be a radio broadcaster. So I am aware of the fact that we can overplay the anti-Semitism card. Hey, it's because you don't like Jews. The fact is, there is extreme bias in the UN, documented, well known for decades. Extreme bias against Israel. And as there is more and more pushback now under the current administration about some of these UN policies, I want to draw attention to this part of our anti-Semitism alert, part of our helping equip the body to deal with the rising tide of Jew hatred. And to repeat what we've said on other broadcasts, I agree with the threefold definition of Natan Sheronsky, Russian dissident, now Israeli political leader, Natan Sheronsky, about when opposing Israel crosses into anti-Semitism. So again, if you say, oh, I think Israel's response in Gaza is too much, or there's been too many children killed and Israel needed to be more careful, and then people argue that back, no, they're being as careful as they can, whatever. You can have that discussion and not be an anti-Semite whatsoever. You can think that Netanyahu is power hungry, and you can say, look, that you've got these extreme right-wing parties that are part of his coalition, and they're dangerous, and I would agree with some of that. And you could point out the right-wing settlers in Judea, Samaria, who are attacking Palestinians, and they themselves are guilty of acts of violence. And many in Israeli populace and even in the government say they're not being cracked down enough. They're not being prosecuted by law enough. And I would agree with that criticism. So there's a lot you can say and differ with Israel, and it's not anti-Semitic. However, as Sheronsky said, when you delegitimize the nation, in other words, the nation of Israel does not have a right to exist. When you demonize the nation, well, all Israelis are this, or Israelis are evil, or Israelis are whatever. When you demonize the nation, or when you use double standards, when you criticize Israel in a way that you would never criticize someone else, any of those three qualify as being anti-Semitic. All right, so what I want to do, I want to share some excerpts with you from my book, Our Hands Are Stained with Blood. Originally came out in 1992, stayed in print continuously. and then we did an updated edition in 2018. So I want to share some content from that, and then some other content that'll just give you an understanding of why I speak of the UN versus Israel. Before I do that, two things. As you're watching this video, are you a subscriber? If you're a subscriber, have you clicked the bell? Okay, so if you're not a subscriber, take a moment. All right, you can pause the video, take a moment, and just subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then, if you're already a subscriber and haven't clicked the bell, or a new subscriber, go ahead and bing, click the bell. What that means is when we put out a new video, or if I'm doing a live stream, Q&A, something like that, maybe spontaneous and you want to get involved with it, then bing, you'll be notified as the video is posted. And this way you don't have to be looking and searching and coming back if you enjoy our content. Also, we would love to send you free our digital Frontline newsletter. It comes out once a month. There's a lead article that I take time to write, pray over, to inspire you, to encourage you. We have some relevant excerpts from one of my books. It's all free, digital. We also have a short Hebrew word study for your edification, a powerful testimony, all that, some inspirational quotes. So it's free, and here's how you get it. Go to thelineoffire.org, thelineoffire.org. Normally that's in our description as well. You should see that. Thelineoffire.org. Just click subscribe. We'll put you on our welcome tour, share more of my own personal testimony with you, and the resources that our ministry has. Thousands of free resources for you, literally thousands, probably over 5,000 or 6,000 between videos, articles, sermons, different things like that. Our contribution to your health in the Lord, our contribution to reach the Jewish people with the good news of the Messiah. Okay, I'm going to share some excerpts from my book, Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, The Tragic Story of the Church and the Jewish People. This is the revised and expanded edition of 2018. And in the book, it begins on page 74. There's a section, what about the Palestinians? And I talk about double standards in terms of how we look at justice for the Palestinians versus justice for the Israelis. So this is from a book by Israeli journalist Ben-Dror Yamini. If I'm correct, he originally was in a fairly radical leftist critique position of Israel and shifted based on truth and facts. His book, Israel Media Lies. In 2012, he writes, the UN General Assembly passed 22 resolutions against Israel, in contrast to 4 against the rest of the world. This is research. You go to unwatch.org, unwatch.org. Go ahead and research this. You'll find every word of this is accurate. In 2012, the UN General Assembly passed 22 resolutions against Israel, in contrast to 4 against the rest of the world. In 2015, the General Assembly adopted 20 resolutions singling out Israel for criticism, and only 3 resolutions regarding the rest of the world combined. As of 2010, since its inception in 2006, the Human Rights Council has adopted 33 resolutions against specific countries, of which 27 were against Israel. In 2013, the Council adopted 25 resolutions, 4 for all the other countries in the world, and 21 against Israel. Hundreds of thousands of people around the world were victims of tyrannical regimes, and countless massacres and pogroms were committed. Israel did not commit even a fraction of these misdeeds, but it has been condemned more than any other country, perhaps more than all other countries combined. Then I raised some questions. Where was the world outcry from the United Nations, from the U.S. Senate, from the media, when Jordan killed more than 3,400 of its own Palestinians during the just 10 days of the infamous Black September riots of 1970? Or when Syria slaughtered 23,000 Palestinians in 1976? And how many times did the UN censure the leadership of Syria during the civil war and more that has raged for most of the last decade and taken at least 500,000 lives with millions more wounded and displaced? Where was the outcry in the UN? I'm gonna skip down some, let's see here. Talking about the Temple Mount uprising. That was major news when it happened. But I'm going to skip down to the bottom of page 75. In 1973, just 4 days after the Arabs attacked Israel on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the Security Council of the United Nations, exploded into prolonged applause. This in itself was highly unusual. When Yaakov Malik of the Soviet Union called the Israelis murderers and international gangsters. Then on October 1st, 1975, the infamous Idi Amin of Uganda, already well known as a savage mass murderer and cannibal who ate the refrigerated body parts of his victims, addressed the United Nations and received a standing ovation from the UN Council Assembly both before and after his speech. His message? He denounced, quote, the Zionist American conspiracy and called for the expulsion of Israel from the UN as well as Israel's extinction. The next day, the UN Secretary General gave a public dinner in his honor. And this has been the pattern for decades. 2013, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon told Jewish students at the UN headquarters in Jerusalem that he recognized his organization's often biased attitude toward their nation, stating that it was an unfortunate situation. On and on. Bottom of page 76. While Sudanese Christians were being slaughtered en masse by Muslim soldiers and gangs, the UN General Assembly spent its time enacting 22 anti-Israel resolutions. This is as incomprehensible as it is unconscionable. 2014, Israel was condemned by the UN 20 times. Afghanistan, China, Cote d'Ivoire, Cuba, Iraq, Sudan, Pakistan, Libya, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Venezuela were condemned 0 times. Iran, Syria, and North Korea were condemned 1 time each. Moreover, the Human Rights Council, which is supposed to have so much on their plate worldwide, chose instead to condemn Israel 5 times in March 2014 alone. And on it goes. Some years back, a special women's council, the UN, met and published their findings in terms of women's rights worldwide. You have countries like Afghanistan, where women can't get education. You have countries like Saudi Arabia. If you're a woman, you're going out, driving, you have a male escort, a male has to be with you, chaperone. On and on it goes, restrictions of women's rights all over the world. And there's one nation that they singled out for condemnation in terms of oppression of women. One nation, Israel. Israel? Israel, where feminists have free sway? Is Israel, where women are actively involved in all facets of the government and the country, where you already had Prime Minister Golda Meir early in their history? Israel? Well, because it's treatment of Palestinian women. This is the madness of what's out there. Okay, a few other illustrations. I just want you to understand that we're not imagining this. There's not some paranoia. We're not hallucinating this. And if you're on YouTube and you look at older videos and there are lots of comments about, like there's one short video, why have Jews been kicked out of allegedly 109 countries, where I address that. You say, well, I don't see that many really bad comments there. You have no idea how many comments we delete. The vast majority of ugly comments that come in on a regular basis on our YouTube channel that are so ugly that we have to delete and sometimes hide the user so their post won't be seen. They're Jew hating on a very, very regular basis. Okay. From 2012 through 2015, some totals here. The United Nations General Assembly has adopted 97 resolutions criticizing countries. 83 out of those 97, so 86%, have been against Israel. This is madness. This is extreme bias. This is anti-Semitism. This is the demonizing of Israel. From 2015 through 2023, the United Nations General Assembly has adopted 154 resolutions against Israel and 71 against other countries. It's a big world out there, and there are all types of atrocities taking place, but Israel gets singled out. Fuad Ajami was a professor at Johns Hopkins University, Middle East specialist himself, Lebanese, and he was at a forum I attended. A colleague invited me to come to this dinner, and then afterwards there was going to be Q&A. Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State, and Fuad Ajami, moderated by Dan Rather. And at the end of the discussion, it was time for questions, so I was the second one in line, and the person that was first said, no, you go first. So I asked a couple of questions, and as things went on, Fuad Ajami, Professor Ajami, said, listen, Iraq uses nerve gas on its own citizens, killing the Kurds decades ago. Iraq uses nerve gas on its own civilians, and the UN says nothing. Israel uses tear gas and gets condemned. This is Professor Ajami making the statement. And when I pressed Dan Rather in terms of reporting, he said, well, Israel is held to a higher standard. I mean, I appreciate that. That's a compliment on the one hand, but you have to use same standards for everybody if you're going to judge fairly and justly. How about this? Human Rights Council. From 2006 through 2024, the Human Rights Council has passed 108 resolutions against Israel. In comparison, Syria has faced 45. So well under half. Iran, 15. Iran just 15. Russia, 10. Venezuela, just 4. Israel has been the subject of more special sessions than any other country. Since the Human Rights Council was created, it has held 1 special session on Libya, 1 on Iran, 3 on Myanmar, 5 on Syria, and 9 on Israel. The Human Rights Council has 10 permanent agenda items. 9 of the 10 are broad. For example, number 1, organizational and procedural matters like adopting the calendar of regular sessions for the cycle. Number 2, annual reports of the UN High Commission for Human Rights and reports of the Office of the High Commissioner. Just procedural stuff, right? Number 4, human rights situations that require the Council's attention, like country-specific abuses. So you've got 10 permanent agenda items. When they gather, okay, it's like a board meeting. We approve board minutes from last year, appoint new board members, whatever, right? Just parliamentary procedure. Except item number 7. This is a permanent agenda item. Human rights situation in Palestine and other occupied Arab territories. Even Secretary General then Ban Ki-moon said this. The Secretary General is disappointed at the Council's decision to single out only one specific regional item, given the range and scope of allegations of human rights violations throughout the world. So you get this. They get together. They have 10 things. These are always items, right? Not we will always make sure we look at the plight of persecuted Christians in Africa. We'll always make sure we look at the plight of persecution of religious faiths in China. No, it's all just broad parliamentary general stuff, broad things. Look at human rights abuses, except one only that is permanent, focused on, quote, Palestinian situation and occupied Arab territories. In other words, evil Israel. Don't tell me this is biased and fair. Don't tell me this is proportionate. It is not, and there is no possible justification for it. And how about UNRWA, which has rightly come under tremendous criticism? United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Near East. So Palestinian refugees, as they're called, are the only group to have a UN organization dedicated to them. All refugees from all of the countries and regions fall under the UN Refugee Agency. In other words, you have the UN dealing with the plight of refugees around the world, right? But there's one with massive funding and with charges that it has been directly involved with Hamas and terrorism. There is one only that focuses just on Palestinian refugees. And here's the other deal. Palestinian, quote, refugees are the only multi-generational refugees involved. In other words, within a generation, refugees are going to get resettled somewhere or be absorbed in a host country or repatriated back to their own country, whatever the case is. But this is a perpetual refugee problem. Why not just, right in the midst of all the struggles going on now and the plight of the people in Gaza, caught in the war between Hamas and Israel, and terrible suffering for the people of Gaza and innocent children suffering. Terrible, painful, horrific to watch and see what's happening. Well, okay, Egypt, just open your borders, let them come in, or other Arab nations, let them come in and be assimilated. No, not going to happen. I mean, our government keeps pressing for that to happen. But if they're refugees, well, then take them in, even temporarily. No. You can go into Lebanon, Syria. You can go into the so-called West Bank, Judea, Samaria, or in Gaza previously, and you will find in all of these locations Palestinian refugee camps. Why is there a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon or in Syria? Why aren't the people just absorbed into they speak the same language, they're the same host religion, most of them? Why not absorb? No, they're perpetual refugees. What about even within, quote, the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, with Palestinian territory, or Gaza, which was completely given over by Israel back to the local population. And then, unfortunately, they elected Hamas as their leaders, as their government. Why were there refugee camps there among their own people? The UNRWA has admitted to a few cases of staff using violent language, but says they're addressing it. There are plenty of concerns of pro-Hamas sympathies and the like within UNRWA that go far deeper than what UNRWA has admitted to. And check this out. Condemning Hamas by name. That should be easy. Should have happened many times by now, especially with Hamas's original charter saying they stood for the extermination of Israel. Check this out. UN General Assembly, to date, has never passed a resolution condemning Hamas by name. Shall I read that again? The UN General Assembly has never passed a resolution condemning Hamas by name. A vote in 2018 did not reach the two-thirds majority required. Okay, you say, but surely after October 7th of 2023, surely that happened. No. October 27th, the UN General Assembly failed to pass a resolution that would have unequivocally rejected and condemned the terrorist attacks by Hamas. Or they may say we deplore the violence on all sides or something like that. But they would not single out and unequivocally reject and condemn Hamas's brutal, barbaric terrorist attacks. There is massive anti-Israel bias within the UN. This is all the more reason you recognize it was the hand of God that was at work in the UN for Israel to be voted in as a nation and for the partition plan to be accepted in 1947. And there would have been a two-state solution then, but the Arab nations rejected it and went to war against Israel. And ironically, a key to Israel being voted in was the influence of Russia and the Soviet bloc, that there were various reasons behind it in the natural, from what I understand, that there was hope, under Stalin in Russia, that there was hope that Israel would be a communist nation, and that would further expand Russian influence in the Middle East. And of course, many of the founding Zionists were communistic in their thinking, communal living and shared resources and things like that. So they had some reason for thinking that. And they also wanted to undermine British control in the region. And this was a way to do it. Okay, have Israel there, and then Israel and Russia can work together, even though there had been a history of anti-Semitism in Russia. Of course, it didn't work out like that. Didn't work out like that at all. But I look at it, especially when you have Stalin, who's the head of Russia then, and he dies a few years later, about to assassinate Jewish doctors, and he dies right before it's going to happen. And it's conjunction with Purim and and all this, and people see the hand of God in that as well. But bottom line is this: there is massive anti-Semitism in the UN. That is a fact. Be aware of it. Pray for justice. Pray for righteousness. Pray for truth to arise, and pray for all those suffering in the Middle East. To say it again, God's love for an Arab and a Jew is the same. When a Palestinian child is killed, an Israeli child is killed, that is grievous in God's sight. It should be grievous in our sight. However, at the same time, we recognize Satan wants to destroy the Jewish people, and we stand with God against the devil and know that his purposes will prevail.